Tekken. Everybody loves Tekken. I know pretty much no one is going to watch this video, but I decided to get this out because this is a video I've been wanting to make for a very long time, since I started making videos, so I decided it would be the perfect time to just release it now. Tekken has a lot of characters, but a few have more interesting stories surrounding them than the rest. So today I'll be taking a look at two characters tangentially related to Tekken that have gone kinda forgotten. One not so obscure and one very obscure. I doubt most of you even knew about it. Thank you for watching. Let's go. So the first character I want to talk about is this little dinosaur dude, Gun. Gun is a character who starred in a manga that ran from 1991 to 2002 in Weekly Morning Magazine, created by Masashi Tanaka. The comic is notable for pretty much lacking any text or dialogue, relying entirely on the visuals. Basically, it's the best thing that's ever happened to people with ADHD. But out of all of the games to appear in, Namco somehow got the license for Gun to appear as an unlockable character in the PlayStation version of Tekken 3, making him the first licensed character to appear in the series, and for a while until Tekken 7, he was the only real guest fighter in the series. There are many ways to unlock him, but the easiest way is to make it onto the leaderboard in survival mode and put your initials in as GON. Gun is a pretty broken character. You can pretty much cheese your way through any fight with his spinning tail, which is honestly his only good move, and he's pretty hard to hit because of his small hitbox. He also farts, and that's funny. I love his victory animations, he's so adorable. If you beat arcade mode as him, he even has his own ending. It's a lot like his adventures in the manga. It certainly aged better visually than the other cutscenes in the game, mostly thanks to Gon's cartoony art style translating to early cheap 3D CGI pretty well. Also, they don't have to compromise anything in his ending to sort of make it match the lack of dialogue in the comics, as none of the other endings really have dialogue either. But my favorite thing about it is that it loops forever until you skip it. Really creative stuff. But I like talking about obscure stuff, and Gun's appearance in Tekken 3 isn't really that obscure, so why not talk about Gun's appearance in other video games? Believe it or not, Tekken 3 wasn't the first game to feature Gun. 4 years earlier, in 1994, Gun got his own self-titled game for the Super Famicom only in Japan, developed by Tosei and published by Bandai. Despite that pedigree maybe setting off some alarms, this game's actually pretty good and super respectful to the source material, barely featuring any text, not even having a user interface. It's super atmospheric and artful for a game made by a usually uncreative contract developer. I don't have a whole lot to say about it. Check it out. In 2012, he starred in another game for the 3DS, only released in Japan and South Korea, called developed by Inti Creates and published by Bandai Namco. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to play this one. This one is based on the Gun TV series that came out around that time. I couldn't really find any consensus on it, but from the looks of it, it doesn't seem as good as the Super Famicom game. But back to Tekken 3. Despite the game being probably the most popular Tekken game, competing only with Tekken 7, the game rarely ever gets re-released, and it's always assumed that Gun's inclusion is the reason why. The only time it was ever re-released was on the PlayStation Classic, proving that it can be re-released. Also, it seems Bandai owns the rights to Gun merchandising, and since they own Namco, they merged with Namco, I don't see licensing the character being that much of an issue. I think the real issue is the laziness of the people in charge, with Katsuhiro Harada saying no one wants a collection of early 3D fighters because they aren't impressive anymore. That's such a stupid statement. I'm not even sure if he actually believes this or if he's just covering up for some laziness. Hopefully one day we can at least get a collection of the first 3 Tekken games and maybe the first tag tournament together, complete with Gun and Tekken 3. But until then, I'm just gonna keep sailing the 7 seas if you catch my drift. Like I said though, Gun isn't really all that obscure. What is obscure is Scuba Diver. Let me explain. So the Soulcalibur games take place in the same universe as Tekken, as evidenced by the presence of the Yoshimitsu Ninja clan from Tekken, implying that these characters are those characters' ancestors. There's also Heihachi's appearance in Soulcalibur 2, but I'm just gonna ignore that. By the way, I know some people insist on calling the Soulcalibur series the Soul series, but that's confusing, and there's only one game in the series not called Soulcalibur, so I'm calling it Soulcalibur. Originally, it was going to go with that naming convention, being named after different soul swords, but because of the popularity of the Soulcalibur name, they just kept it. Anyway, speaking of that one game not called Soulcalibur, I want to talk about the first title in the series, Soul Edge, or Soul Blade as it was named outside of Japan for unfortunate reasons. But I'm gonna keep calling it Soul Edge because, I mean, it's named that for a reason. Anyways, Soul Edge is actually pretty good. Not as good as the game that followed it, which honestly might be the best fighting game ever made. I mean, it has been the most critically acclaimed one for years for a good reason. In the PlayStation version of Soul Edge, you can unlock and play as the titular Soul Edge itself, the evil sword that corrupts people, or rather its physical embodiment, which would later be known as Inferno. If you get to the end of arcade mode as Soul Edge, you get a cutscene where the cursed blade falls into the ocean, and then the text 400 years later appears, and you see a scuba diver discover the Soul Edge, supposedly becoming its next victim, and presumably the first one in over 4 centuries. It's really haunting. I can't picture these games past Soulcalibur 2 doing anything as horrific as this or Siegfried's ending in Soul Edge anymore. Regardless, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that given that Soulcalibur and Tekken presumably take place in the same universe, if this ending is canon, it should probably have some bearing on the events of the Tekken series. Soul Edge takes place in 1583. Meaning that this scene takes place around 1983. Now, it's never been stated specifically when the Tekken games are supposed to take place, just some vague current setting, and then there's the time skip between Tekken 2 and 3. But this might mean that the scuba diver character is existing alongside the events of the Tekken games. Once again, only if we take this ending as canon, which it's clearly not supposed to be. But I think things are more fun when you pretend it is. This diver character can actually be hacked into the main game as well. Being a clone of Sophitia was Soul Edge's name. But what makes things really confusing to me is that because of how poorly received the story developments in Soulcalibur 5 were, they've rebooted the series with a new timeline in its latest entry, Soulcalibur 6. Immediately as this was revealed, all I could think about was, how does this affect Tekken? Does Tekken now take place in this new timeline? I mean, I get these series are only loosely tied together by one set of characters, but still, I don't know. I just really like this ending. Once again, I couldn't imagine them doing something like this now. And I think it would be neat if they went absolutely bonkers and decided to include this character in Tekken 8 or something. Anyways, thank you for watching. Thank you to my patrons. Have a wonderful day.